It was intended for the human to support the machine to support the human and working.
And AI means something different to anybody you talk to, which is wild.
This is AI or Die.
Hey everybody, welcome to AI or Die episode 27. Rehgan and Brendan are here. Rehgan is back after maternity leave. We're so excited to have her. It's also Halloween, so we're going to be talking through obviously what's going on in our personal lives, what's going on AlignAI, what's in the news, and then we have a special guest joining later, Jenny Owens from Cleveland Clinic. She runs a lot of the AI governance work over there. We're going to get deep into AI at Cleveland Clinic, what they're working on, what she's seeing from an AI governance standpoint. So really excited to chat with her. Until then, opening up to the group, Brendan, Rehgan, how are you? Rehgan, I'll start with you because you recently had a baby. There's a lot going on in your personal life. How are you? Good to see you again.
Good. I got some sleep last night, thankfully.
Finally.
So words are still hard though, you know. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah. Yes, doing great. He's doing great. We're all happy. I'm happy to be back. It's, you know, conflicting feelings, right?
Totally.
But yeah.
It's funny because we had the company all hands back in August. You had to leave shortly after. It was a whirlwind of a ton of other stuff going on. And now you're back week 2. I don't know. It's like you're right back into it. Seems like the transition on my end has been going well. I'm sure you're dealing with a ton of chaos at home and everything else to balance both the baby and work, of course.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of an adjustment to get back into like a schedule and a routine and stuff, especially, you know, a 2-month-old does not really stick to a routine. So that's been a little bit of an adjustment, but I gotta say, like, stepping away and coming back with kind of fresh eyes on things has been really interesting. Yeah. I was also a little nervous to see how like much would happen in the space of AI in 2 months, and I'd come back and be like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So it hasn't been too bad.
Honestly, yeah, because this stuff moves pretty quick. We talk about the news every single month on these episodes, and it seems like so much happens. Seems like just a continued wave of investment in the space for especially the big players and a lot more partnerships. We kind of called this at the top of the year, but like additional partnerships between like NVIDIA and Palantir and Meta and OpenAI and all the big ones, especially with Microsoft all in the mix there too. So yeah, not a lot of crazy things going on in the news that you missed. And AlignAI is still here. We ran for a couple months while you were out as well.
Thank God. It would be really bad if I came back and it was not here.
You know what? There's some close calls that Brendan and I will just keep secret forever. You know, that'll just be between us, Vegas rules. But yeah.
Exactly.
We have a whole file that we're shredding.
Whole file of just burn the files. Brendan, how are you, man? Good to see you. I know I talked to you last month, but what's new in your life? What's going on?
It's good. Just hanging out, doing Spain things. They're doing trick-or-treating in my apartment building, and they're not used to it. So it's really funny to like see how they're like planning it all out and coordinating everything. So Halloween's not as big here, but they're starting to get into it. So I'm excited for them to. It's like our best holiday. So I'm glad they're picking up on that.
It's still celebrated. Do you guys give out candy and stuff in Spain like in the US? Is it a different type of candy or any other weird traditions?
I think they still hand out candy. Like I've only seen it like in the restaurants in certain neighborhoods. Like the kids will go to the restaurants to get like little snacks or like candies or things like that. But this is the first time I'll see it like in a residential. I think we had one trick-or-treater last year, and it was like another American living abroad. So
it's kind of sad.
But this is all like the like local Spanish Catalan people. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you guys would hand out tapas instead of candy or anything like that.
Just patata bravas. And like the way to go.
Yeah. In my life, let's see what's going on. Tons going on, especially just with supporting our customers. Our customer base is ever growing. We're seeing a ton of patterns with AI centers of excellence getting stood up. A lot of this getting formalized just around like setting really specific targets around like how quickly AI use cases are moving through the system of review and approvals as well too. So it's always so exciting, especially now that we have like customer groups using AlignAI getting stood up within a lot of these enterprises as well. It's just neat to start to expand into the community side of things. So professionally, that's been really top of mind, is operationalizing a lot of the CS stuff that we do and how we still support our customers where it really counts. And then personal life, just went to LA, visited a friend out there. So got to spend a long weekend just hanging out, doing a lot of hiking, went and saw Joshua Tree for the first time. Never saw that national park. So that was super cool to check out. But outside of that, same old. You're looking forward to the holidays. Cool. So that's what's going on in our personal lives. In the news, I was pulling up kind of news articles over the past couple of weeks. It's a ton of just investments. So OpenAI laying groundwork for an IPO. I think they're targeting something like 500 billion to 1 trillion in terms of their IPO. They will continue to be pulling on more and more funds just to really invest in the space. NVIDIA continues to partner with like Palantir to set up an overall enterprise data intelligence as their focus space. That may be relevant for our listeners as they're thinking about just like, hey, what is the consolidation in the space coming up? And another article I found that was very interesting was, California has taken a step to really ban AI chatbots from posing as licensed health providers, like starting to get into those edge cases of like, how are folks opening up risk to their own personal lives and talking with chatbots who may be falsely posing as these professionals in that way too? Why don't you get your guys' reactions to one or any of those kind of articles? Rehgan, I'll start with you. Anything jump out to you as like particularly interesting just about that?
Yeah, I've been following Palantir's journey for a while now.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we talked to them years and years ago, even about potential partnerships. And I think what they're doing is really fascinating. And when they showed us the product that they were working on at the time, it made sense because I think it was actually like pre-Gen AI boom, honestly. So they were still working on a lot of their ML capabilities. And so I just think what they're doing is really fascinating and the way that they were approaching it. I haven't seen the product in a long time, obviously, so I'm not quite sure like how they've positioned themselves. I do know that they were more focused on this like context element and creating an ontology for organizations, which I think is super critical. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they're partnering up with NVIDIA. I assume that's like a go-to-market play, right? Like, I'm not quite sure exactly from a, compute side what they needed from NVIDIA to support what they were doing specifically. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting partnership.
Certainly a powerhouse. Your thoughts, Brendan?
Yeah, I've been hearing Palantir recently is like doing deeper ERP kind of management. So I'm wondering if that's going to be kind of the future for some of these AI companies too. Their general platforms, but they start moving more and more into specific domains or specific problems to solve. I know Palantir does a lot more than that, obviously, especially on the defense side of things. But overall, I just wonder if that will become a new pattern as we see a lot of these kind of existing heavy B2B SaaS, like the CRMs, the ERPs, a lot of those existing application layers, if they start getting moved more and more over into like these data native, AI native ones, or how that's going to kind of play out in the next 5 to 10 years here, because that could be a huge change in what a lot of the tech big companies look like.
Yeah, especially I was talking with Jenny, our guest, coming on a bit later about how even like Epic put out their My Insights dashboard like 25 years ago, back in 2000. So it's like these massive Epics, the ServiceNows, who have built up this enterprise presence, like looking at how can they continue to expand their functionality in this new AI space, especially with associates building out agentic solutions as well too. So super fascinating. I think we'll continue to see that trend of consolidation, a lot of these big players working together and just trying to connect the dots to really be that single place for associates in that way too.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on that mental health one as well. I think that's really interesting with the regulation coming, because I'm hearing more people, just like the general chatter, right? Because we work in AI, so people talk to us about AI. And like a lot of the conversations I've been having recently have been like how people are using it. I also saw some of the Pew survey results. We're talking a lot about like how people aren't doing critical thinking as much anymore, or concerned about how it's going to affect critical thinking. So a lot of the conversations I'm kind of having on the street are actually a lot more about how people are using it, like for therapy modalities and things like that. So I think that regulation makes a lot of sense. Should it be regulation? Should companies just do it anyways? That's based on your political views probably, but all that to say, I think it's a good disclaimer, because I notice even ChatGPT will say like, hey, I'm not a doctor. Like if you ask it something medical related, like it has built in prompts probably to just warn the user. I think that should be a pretty standard issue. Again, regulation or not, like that should just exist for all systems that touch things like that. I've also heard of very creative mental health AI apps that are coming on that are like also focusing on like train the trainer or work with the clinician directly instead of going direct to patient to have more of that human in the loop. But I think those applications are brilliant. I think that's really wise. I think it's good to like, be mindful about what we trust AI with, and then what we kind of have more rigor around.
Because it can sound obvious on the surface, like it's a chatbot. Why are you thinking that it's a clinician? But I think it's so fascinating how people are building these relationships with these chats, with these AI solutions, because of just the time and energy that they put into it and get out of it. Like I was just glancing in the news, like shout out to Ohio. An Ohio lawmaker is proposing a ban on AI marriage. So saying people do not marry your your AI chat. It's hilarious.
Oh my.
And it seems obvious on the surface, but it's so fascinating. The human condition of building relationships with anything, even like a chatbot in some way.
All right, we're pivoting the company. We're going to marry OpenAI, and then we're going to divorce it for half the money. That's the new.
There we go. Smart. Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, you can get ordained to marry an AI and a human. I'm so curious how Vegas weddings are going to start to go as well too. It's so funny.
I listened. I was trying to catch up on podcasts and stuff, and I listened to one from back in August, and there was kind of like a lot of studies coming out about like AI psychosis and like people really getting into this like, I don't know, mental state with these AI systems that like really, really intelligent individuals, getting into this mental state with these AI systems. I mean, I have not experienced that. I will say that usage of my ChatGPT has gone up quite a bit since having a baby, because you're just like, what do I do? And you're asking it all sorts of advice. And in a lot of cases, it is somewhat medical advice, or it is like, my baby's doing this, like, is that normal? Or, there's all sorts of crazy things that happen when you have an infant, and like, it has been super useful. And, you can't like take everything that it tells you. And of course you're going to look up different techniques or different things that you could do, but I'm not asking it, intense medical advice. I'm just asking for more general things, but I do think I know better, you know what I mean? And so I'm not going to take that at face value. I'm going to bring things to my pediatrician. We're going to talk about it. And like, so I do think pairing it with that human in the loop element, especially for things like medical, it's super helpful to like get people to be knowledgeable. And I've had to be in the hospital, obviously, several times in the last 3 months. And it has been nice to be able to talk, like be able to ask intelligent questions, or I was actually thinking how much the medical staff probably hated ChatGPT, because people are now asking all of these questions as if they know exactly what the diagnosis is. And I think that's just like really funny. And then for the medical staff that's a little bit more empathetic to like people wanting to be educated, I think they could take it one way. And then, obviously some medical staff could get really frustrated with that kind of experience. But
kind of like with WebMD, right? People feel more informed. They feel more confident in what the information they have.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've been in doctor's appointments where they just pull up WebMD and I feel better. So I'm like, if you just pull ChatGPT, you want to like double check, like that's cool with me. Like I don't mind paying you, but also to like verify with yourself. Like
I don't know, man.
There's a lot of medical things to learn. So if you need to like reference something, like I'm in for it. It's fine.
I would not feel better if my surgeon's pulling up ChatGPT operating on me.
Primary care, not surgery.
I was gonna say, think about it this way though. Like they're smart enough to be able to validate some of the information or see if it's like that makes sense or doesn't make sense. We've talked about this before, where it's not replacing the knowledge, but it's rather like providing suggestions where you're like, that doesn't really seem right. And you can continue to drill into that, but they're knowledgeable enough to be able to navigate that. Whereas, it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where you like think you know everything if you don't know a lot about a situation. And so I think people find themselves in that category when they start using these types of tools. It's like, now you're an expert and you've used ChatGPT for one day on a really specific topic you've never looked at before. So I don't know. It does. I could see how like somebody who's extremely knowledgeable using some of these tools would still be useful, and I would be for it also.
Oh, I mean, and worth bringing up, the reason we're talking about this today is although it's in the consumer market, like this will start to permeate into the enterprise space too, around like a new employee coming on, chatting with a chatbot about the enterprise and the policies and what's going on. And that same effect of like feeling like you have more of the answers, but still having that HR human in the loop or that ops person in the loop to really like confirm, sure, here's what it says on paper, but like, here's the real lived experience that my colleagues have had inside the enterprise too. Like that's certainly coming.
Yeah. I saw an interesting post on LinkedIn today that was like, they're talking about the Amazon layoffs, like the 30,000 people that were being laid off actively from Amazon. And it was like, I don't think Amazon called out like AI automation, but their take on it, I thought was interesting. I'm not sure if this is the real reason or anything, but they're saying that like larger enterprises with AI don't need as many kind of like middle layer management. Like there can be more efficient kind of up and downstream cross team collaboration. I've also heard some of this kind of in the operating model design of work circles that I'm running in as well, of like how AI can provide so much more context where it's not just like automating developers, but it's also like reducing a lot of the friction that naturally arises as your org chart gets, complicated, like in an enterprise. So I think that's just really interesting to think about, like what are the other dimensions of work that start changing with AI, and how does that make bigger orgs feel flatter because we have a lot more access to information instead of setting up emails, pinging people, throwing, emails over the wall to another team you haven't met before.
The bureaucracy that everybody complains about. Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
It might just be an excuse too to say, like, think about how well you can hire at a company that big. I mean, it makes sense to do a purge of like a part of your workforce and have an excuse to do that, right? So I always wonder how much of that is truly related back or just an opportunity for them to say, we know that there's a bottom performer, and it might not even be their bottom performers that they got rid of. I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't looked into it, but I think going back to the medical example too, the thing I keep thinking about are those examples where people can get suggest a test that their doctor didn't put on their chart to run, and they can suggest a test, and then that would lead to a finding that's pretty significant for them. And I've seen a couple of stories where that's happened, where the patient was using ChatGPT and had suggested taking a test that the doctor didn't even think about. And it ended up being a significant result that helped them get to a diagnosis for what they were dealing with. So I've seen interventions like that too, where people have leveraged it. So I don't even see the downfall in using it in that scenario, because, why not come up with more options?
Yeah, it's like my aunt's a doctor, and I feel like that's always been like the secret thing that whenever we have medical issues, like she can help you navigate the system because the hospital is so complicated and there's so much to know. Like it's like everybody has an aunt who's a doctor, right? Like somebody to weigh in to help them kind of figure out what's going on, because it's totally very difficult if you're not familiar with it, how to like get around.
Things like asking to run additional tests and knowing what tests to ask for, right? It's so much of an art even still. I mean, in the medical field and in just enterprise and business strategy, so talking about the implications of that in enterprise, it's like, how can it inform additional testing or experimentation or things to try in terms of hitting strategic goals and like setting up more efficient processes? I mean, even pre this whole AI and Gen AI boom, that whole management layer reduction was a classic like OpEx transformation approach as well too, just trying to remove the bureaucracy and the layers of like things to go through for approvals and just to streamline the process end to end and look at it from a value stream standpoint. So I love hearing that continue to come back around of like orienting AI solutions and efforts to like the value stream at the end of the day and like pointing to that to help drive more efficient processes. Cool. On to the next topic. We just have a few more minutes before Jenny joins, getting into more of the interesting kind of AI governance lane of things. We're going to ask her more about it at Cleveland Clinic, but I think something to share overall, just an interesting pattern we're seeing, is just that AI centers of excellence in general, AI governance committees in general, are getting a lot more formalized to the point where teams are starting to talk about, back to that efficiency play, like what are SLAs, or what are at least like time that each use case should spend throughout the life cycle, and like how can we look to shorten that, and like what are the bottlenecks like that we're purely seeing around gathering information and doing those approvals too. I think that's having a real moment just in the last 6 months, and I find that particularly exciting. We're seeing that more and more in practice in a lot of the enterprises we talk with. I wonder if listeners at home are also seeing that in their orgs, just around setting much more urgent goals around value, but also just time it takes to run use cases through the machine. Why don't you get your guys' reaction to that?
Yeah, I think like one interesting thread I'm picking up, especially this week, we're working heavily on like a data governance project, and data governance is more mature, just given the space being more established. And they're working a lot on like the metadata that's collected throughout the life cycle and who provides it, how is it maintained. Some of this kind of like ties into like MDM pieces like master data management. Some of it just ties into general like collaboration from like stewardship through people who are leveraging data. And I think that's interesting because I'm starting to see something similar as well on the AI side of things, where at different phases, like how do we define certain pieces of metadata or information that need to move downstream with this model as it goes from like initial risk assessment to the downstream teams that are even building things like model monitoring alert thresholds, right? Creating more YAML file configuration to automate pieces inside of like the deployment repo to manage this even while it's in production. So it's just kind of an interesting thread that I'm noticing between, or pattern between, what data governance teams do and then also what AI teams can also start leveraging to help make sure that when they do get audited, when the information does need to get extracted, there's a clear definition of who's providing it at what phase of the project, especially as these teams are establishing more of that, who's doing which pieces of this as it goes through to production and beyond, kind of adding that layer as well of who's putting in this metadata, where does it go, how do we maintain it over time?
And like, what's that ongoing like accountability for the monitoring and the re-review? And if there's a new feature that gets unlocked inside of the already approved software, what's the process to run that back through as well? That doesn't have to be as heavy as before. Like we hear a lot of like, how can we unlock a fast track process? Because we shouldn't be getting in the way. We should be that kind of like shepherd up the mountain to help just folks understand what they need to do and what information they need to provide. Cool. I took a pause in my talking because I think now's a good time to pause just while Jenny joins in a few minutes. I'll do an intro for her. We can start recording again.
It's my washing machine.
Oh, is it your washing machine? I was wondering what it was.
I heard a ringing, yes. And then I muted myself and muted you guys to check my side if it was like car brakes outside or something. But it's just a light ring, you know? Yeah. We'll see if it drives people crazy. Who knows? Or
You just cut me out of the entire episode. That's okay.
Or maybe our dog listeners will love it, right? Like,
yeah. leave the jokes in though. Leave the jokes in. Then cut it out. I'll just be like the comic relief guy. You know?
Leave the jokes in. You just like, yeah, he's like the side puppet or whatever that just has a joke or a zinger.
Yeah, I wondered what that was. You just reminded me I need to go change my laundry.
Yep. I got a whole pile of LA clothes that I need to wash all the Joshua Tree dust off of them.
Oh, B, I sent Nick our Joshua Tree pics from a decade ago.
10 years ago, man.
10 years ago? Oh, God.
10 years ago. Yeah, well, 9 years ago.
Oh, close enough is no different. Yeah. 10 years is crazy.
Yikes.
Yep.
I think I still got, that's like the beginning of my iPhone. Like I think I got my iPhone like right before, so like my photos go back to like literally it's pictures of Joshua trees. So I'm looking back at it right now.
Yeah, my very first photos are like right before college graduation. So yeah, like 2015, about 10 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, little baby Brian when he was so young. Oh, that's funny.
I kind of miss working with him actually. It was like 4 years ago I worked with him on that project.
Yeah. Oh God, this is so long ago. That's funny.
Yeah, it's wild.
Old so Texas.
But yeah, Joshua Tree is super cool. I want to go back already. It was a lot of fun.
Can I tell you about 2 funny interviews I had today?
Yeah, sure.
We need to fill some space. Basically, the one guy, he was smart, but like he was right. He hadn't had like a real development job yet, but he was like real. He like custom built all this agentic orchestration stuff, and he's just like kind of bragging about like rebuilding everything from scratch. And I was like, oh, you don't want to talk about that in an interview. You want to say you used it off the shelf and then put it into production and people used it. Like he's like, oh, I found it wasn't doing exactly what I needed, so I rebuilt it. And I was like, you don't want to do that.
Flex, you think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's smart though. Maybe we will work with him in the future. And then the other one was like obvious screen reader. He had like Stanford on his LinkedIn for computer science, and then he had like a different college on his resume. I was like, hey, where'd you go to school? And he gave like a canned answer, and then I was like, he said Stanford for cognitive science, or Princeton, not Stanford. Science, that for cognitive science, not computer science. And I was like, hey, you got it wrong. Like you got an interview question wrong. That was where'd you go to college? Like that's pretty.
What do they think is going to happen? Do they think they're just going to like fool their way into a dream job for like years and nobody will know?
Yeah, I heard it's like some of them are like phishing. I'm not saying this guy in particular. I'm not going to go any further, but some of them are like phishing where they will join your company and then steal everything and then like roll out. Like that's a new like scam thing that happens. So
they're like spies, little employee spies.
Yep.
That's what I've been doing the whole time.
The long game, baby. The long game.
All right, Jenny should be on a sec. Meg, we should see her in like the backstage, right? And then you'll let her in.
Yeah, she's here. I was going to say, I see 5 people in the studio chat.
Okay, great. Meg, can you let her into the front?
One second, Jenny. Sorry.
Yep. One sec. Meg, our host, is going to let you into the front stage. Once she does that, Jenny, I sent you the topics. We're going to edit this section out, but just make sure once you come to front stage that you're good to go on the topics. I'll provide you an intro and then we'll get into it, just like you're in my episode yesterday.
I sent her Slack too.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, there she is.
There she is.
Hi, I'm live. You can hear me, right?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear us okay?
I can. You sound great.
Good. You remember me, of course. I don't know if you've met Brendan or Rehgan yet. So co-founders of the company. Brendan leads the product side, Rehgan's CEO. She just got back from maternity leave. So this is our first episode with her back.
Well, congratulations. That's all very exciting. I'm delighted to meet both of you.
Nice to meet you.
Excited to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought it'd be fun to continue the convo from yesterday on the AI governance side of things.
It's amazing.
That was a really fun conversation. We're recording now, but we'll edit all this out.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I had your intro right. AI governance leader at Cleveland Clinic, HIMSS Northern Ohio chapter, AI COE committee chair, podcast host, of course. Anything else you want me to mention, please let me know. And you can continue to expand on it. I would love for you to share like your background, the work you're doing at Cleveland Clinic, and then we can get into some of the governance stuff that you're seeing.
It sounds perfect. And I thought your conversation topics were great as well.
Sweet. All right, let me do the formal intro for you then.
All right, sounds good.
All right, everybody, we have our guest for today, Jenny Owens from Cleveland Clinic. Hi, Jenny. How are you? Thanks for joining.
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is so exciting.
Yeah, seriously. I join your show, now you join ours. We're excited to have you. For folks listening in, Jenny really works in the AI governance side of things at Cleveland Clinic. She's also the HIMSS Northern Ohio kind of AI COE committee chair. She also has her own podcast. Jenny, I'm going to ask you to plug your podcast, your LinkedIn, how folks can get in contact with you later as well. We've had so many good conversations just over the past week. So excited to have you on. And if you wouldn't mind, Jenny, just for listeners at home, sharing more about the work you're doing and kind of how you got into this space in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, thanks so much for this opportunity to chat with you. I'm hoping we can just have like a casual conversation about everybody's favorite topic, AI governance, right? Everybody loves to talk about that. Yeah. So my day job at Cleveland Clinic, my title is Senior AI Program Administrator. And what that means really is that there's a group of north of 25 of us now who all report to our Chief AI Officer. And there's a team full of machine learning analysts and data scientists and machine learning scientists. And they're all doing really fantastic internal development of products that are being used by the enterprise. And then there's me. And if it's not technical, I probably have my hand in it somehow. And that means that the majority of our AI governance administration, so that's our governance group, our AI task force that we'll talk about in excruciating detail in a bit, But also I get to talk out of both sides of my mouth very frequently, because while I do a lot of governance, I also do a lot of work in literacy and enablement. What do we need to arm people with so that they feel empowered to take AI tools and try to craft new solutions to the workflows and the problems that they know best, right? Not everybody has the opportunity to be around artificial intelligence all day, every day. Not everybody has the kind of super nerdy, social circles that I do, where everybody knows that we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. But even if you're not, what do you need to know? And what do you need to know in order to do so safely and effectively? So that's really the majority of my job description.
This is going to be awesome, because
I was going to say, how rare to own enablement and adoption and then also be on the governance side. I never see people do both.
And it's great because the tension that can exist sometimes organizationally between those two instead just gets to be embodied in me. And I spend lots of time arguing with myself, both like currently and also in the past. Like past Jenny said things that now future Jenny is like, oh, why would you do that? But it's great. And it means that I get to have a more well-rounded, holistic approach to AI in healthcare in general, instead of feeling like, oh, well, my role is like in the past, I've had roles that were more heavily compliance focused, right? And when your role is compliance focused, then you start to embody that compliance. My job is to know the rules and make sure that people follow the rules. So this leaves room for creativity in ways that are really fun.
And I know our listeners at home who also work in hospital systems, they're probably working on a lot of similar projects. Like leading up to today, would you say there's been a bit of a parallel focus on enablement and on AI governance, or was it more of a step function of one being a priority before the other?
Oh boy, I think they've both been a priority, but higher priorities to different groups at different times. And so one of the things that's really fascinating to me is I'm trying to think of a good anchor for the other end of my spectrum. I think about AI governance personalities, or the roles that people play in AI governance, as existing on a spectrum from oh my God, this is a random example. Sam the Eagle from the Muppets. Like he's always kind of making this face, and he's extremely law abiding and very rules oriented, and he's no fun at all ever, right? Yeah. That's the Sam the Eagle promise, right? That's anchoring one end of the spectrum of governance. We will know the rules. If there aren't rules, we're gonna write them, and then everybody will follow them.
Yeah.
And then on the other end, I think about Doc Brown from Back to the Future, right? Like that man has never met an OSHA regulation ever before in his entire life. And he's not concerned about it. Like scientific ethics, not a thing. We can try something and we're going to do it. And I'll put my life on the line because why not?
Yeah.
And so I feel like having these two personality types kind of anchor the discussion. Of course, to our Sam the Eagles, we've got governance concerns being first and foremost. Like AI is technology with tremendous power to harm patients and to damage the reputation of our institution and to leak our data. We absolutely must govern. And they're absolutely right. And then you've got your Doc Browns over here who are like, oh my gosh, this intoxicating new technology unlocks new ways to treat our patients and to provide care and new ways to access care. And they are also absolutely right. And so, to navigate and sort of which one is higher priority at what point in time matters very much. It matters very much the context in which you're encountering that discussion, right? Are you encountering it in a discussion like with a bunch of VC founders? Are you encountering it from the position of an exasperated person who's on the floor just trying to take care of patients and being like, if they give me one more new training, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah. Especially as we think about like building champions among clinicians and among other folks within operations to support this. Like, how do you think about like the right people for those roles? More the Doc Browns versus like the other side? Like, because it's a matter of like driving interest and like that pipeline of great ideas of like, how could we transform our company with AI while managing, of course, the overarching policies that we need to adhere to, and like making sure people understand that as well. Do you get to play a role around like building more of that federated champion model inside of the org as well? And what have you seen?
So I think what's really important is I want to take a step back and I want to talk literally about our governance structure at Cleveland Clinic, because I think it does accurately harness everybody's varying approaches and individual risk tolerances. And we do a good job of creating a unified approach where all those perspectives have their voice. And yet we've got one governance approach for the enterprise. So governance at Cleveland Clinic runs through a multidisciplinary group, and this is really commonly recommended, but we've had ours in place for probably, I don't know, maybe 6 months longer than most of the recommendations, because we were just very slightly ahead of the curve on AI governance. And that's due to a fabulous former data and AI governance person who's left the organization, but whose legacy really echoes throughout. He had really great thoughts on data governance and similar thoughts on AI governance. And so our multidisciplinary group contains both clinicians and non-clinicians. It contains representatives from our cybersecurity, obviously, as one would hope, also from our legal and compliance divisions. I don't think there's any surprises there. We've got folks from our data science group. So when we need somebody to really weigh in on the statistical performance of a particular model or tool, they are there. They have actually done their work in advance, and they have documentation that says, hey, our area under the curve for this particular tool is 0.64. Let's talk about what that might mean in this particular use case for this particular workflow. We also have representation from our bioethics division. And this is something that makes us a little bit unique. And I really cannot speak highly enough about our bioethics representation, because when you need somebody to really bring a moral and philosophical grounding to the questions that you're asking, you can't be a bioethicist, right? They deal with this stuff all the time. And I always find that perspective is one that is fascinating to me. What is the dialogue outside of hospital administration about artificial intelligence and these sort of really interesting issues about what does it mean to receive care? What does it mean to have agency in your care? That perspective is invaluable. And I really encourage anybody who has the opportunity to work with the bioethicists, please do, because they're great.
I was going to ask, there's in the hospital systems, especially, like that interesting comparison between like AI and innovation and research versus AI and clinical operations.
Yeah.
You get to see a little bit of both. Is it more on the clinical operation side in terms of the majority of use cases coming through?
Almost exclusively. And part of that is by design.
Yeah.
So way back when artificial intelligence was a little bit newer and a little bit less mature, we made an organizational decision that we weren't on the operational side really going to review AI for research. And this was a decision that we made on purpose with the intention of not standing in the way of AI, of research in AI,
Yeah.
research using AI, and research on AI.
Yeah.
We didn't want to stand in the way of that. And so we're constantly sort of evaluating and poking at this. Like we've had a couple of examples recently where we have actually taken a look at and reviewed projects that are in a randomized clinical trial point in their development, but the end result is a tool that is intended to be used clinically. And so, in those cases, we really say, hey, we're not going to do our full formal vote. We're not going to give you a move forward or don't. We're not going to tell you we definitely want this information or that. But since the end result is something that you're going to come back to us if your trial is successful and say, hey, AI task force, please approve this because I have a go live date in 2 weeks. I don't want that to be the first time we see it. I don't want that to be the first time you have a chance to talk to us. There's so much more richness to this conversation that we'd like to discuss. So let's go ahead and have it now. Even if this technically is research, the end product of that research is likely to be deposited in the clinical and operational domain in the end. So let's have the conversation now.
I know you and
I was just going to ask how you set up the culture of this group that you work within, because I find, the tone is usually set at a company level, like pre-AI, right? When it's like, how well do these groups work together anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Because for any company, they've had a mechanism of evaluating risk before AI was introduced, right? They've had a mechanism of evaluating legal risks and security risks and, risks to patients for specific software or policy change or whatever. And so I'm curious from your perspective, was that culture kind of set prior to this group kind of coming together, or was it something that was intentionally done as the group was formed?
Oh boy. I think the culture of our group really reflects the overall culture of Cleveland Clinic as an institution that is really devoted, yes, absolutely, to providing absolutely stellar care for our patients. But right hot on the heels of that is we're devoted to educating the next generation of care providers and doing research into disease. And so that mode of we are always teaching, we are always learning, we are always curious about what might be next. That philosophy very heavily flavors this sort of, I mean, there really is a lot of very free dialogue in our governance groups. And there's a lot of discussion about, okay, well, we are looking at this particular project, but I want to set aside this particular project for the moment. And I want to talk about, like, let's say that, for example, we're looking at a large language model based tool, right? So let's put aside this particular project and let's talk in general. How do you evaluate large language models in the medical context? What is important for them to do well and what is important for them not to do well? What is our risk tolerance around hallucinations? How do we handle the fact that an LLM is not really deterministic, right? You can prompt it 30 different ways. It'll give you, you could prompt it the same way 30 times. It'll give you 30 different responses. And so what does that mean? Really, what does it mean? How does the technology function? And how do we need to train our folks to interact with it appropriately? So the ability to scale up and down very quickly from, we have this project, we have these philosophical thoughts on the technology. What do these mean for this particular project? Okay, we're going to move it forward and we're going to consider adding these things to our documentation.
Yeah, it's a lot to do. And I think to your point, accuracy and performance is always contextualized to how it's being leveraged. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes, this is my observation, that's what makes it so hard and so manual, is that it is in every circumstance in which it's being leveraged. So how are you managing it from that perspective? Like, is this just a manual, task and it's just heavily involved regardless, or do you see a way of scaling it more broadly?
So Nick has heard me hop up on my soapbox and have this particular portion of my TED Talk before. And I think part of the challenge around AI governance and what makes it different from data governance is that you are not just focused on the data that feeds the model, and you're not just focused on the model performance, right? Your area under the curve scores, your positive predictive value, your negative predictive value, all of that is really crucial. But when you get into artificial intelligence, at some point, you hit a human being who picks up the output of that model or that tool and then does something with it. And so our AI governance has to cover all of this part of it, right? It's not just about the model, it's about the human being who is working with the model. And right now, I can't say that there is I don't know of any organization that has a good unified approach to being able to monitor both the model performance and the action space post-model. I think we are doing a lot of talking about what does this look like and what does a tool have to do successfully in order for it to provide that sort of meaningful feedback. I think as we start to, and when I say we here, I'm not speaking on behalf of my employer. I'm kind of talking about all of us nerds here and how in AI in general. I think as we start to mature our governance approach from, first it was like literally, here is a thing. How do we feel about this thing? Is it ChatGPT versus Claude versus, this or that? And now it's, well, we have this tool or we have this tool, and it's now more project-based. As we continue to move up that maturity ladder, right? So we're thinking about use cases then. And then we're starting to think about, okay, well, we're thinking about a primary use case, call it like an on-label use. And then what might the off-label uses be? As we get more conversant with the technology and better at spotting opportunities that might not be, immediately apparent, I think we'll start to be able to say, kind of like you would manage a human being, right? Like Jenny is a human being who is good at reading papers. Her strength is maybe less if you ask her to, produce high quality text generated on a short timeline. I tend to panic, and what you get is maybe not high quality. So as you start thinking about managing an individual, Jenny is good for roles where we can give her chunks of time to sit and focus on reading papers and to go at her papers until a thought is finished. You can also think about starting to manage your tools, right? So like a RAG model is going to be very good at keeping a static library and at generating text based on that library. It'll have a lower hallucination rate. If you want something that is going to be web grounded, if you want something that is more up to date, you might want to consider this or that. When we have a machine learning model or a predictive model, when do we want to think about when these things operate well and other potential uses for that technology as well?
That's where I think it's brilliant that you're on both the enablement and the governance side, because you talk about the point of use implications, like it's so related to like how we think about governing and mitigation planning and like doing test cases associated to that too. Like I think I love that you talked about like what's the primary use and then what are all the alternate uses, and like how do we make sure the governance body of people approving this stuff aren't going down all these rabbit holes of how it could or might get used, but like what's the reality and how can we tighten the scope to that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's so funny because sometimes there's nothing I love like making up a scenario that is not actually on the table and then getting really mad about that scenario instead of actually dealing with the problem at hand. But what's really interesting is this, in order to think about like on-label and off-label use, right? You really have to take your model or your tool to the level where it's going to be used. I think that the best example here is, let's say that you have a predictor of whether a patient is going to experience post-operative complications. If you're a surgical center, you want to know which patients are likely to be complex. So maybe you don't put like your first year residents on them, right? Maybe you give them your, like slightly more experienced doctors when they come out of surgery. So you've got somebody, you've matched your patient complexity with your physician experience. That's nice, right? Who wouldn't want to do that? But that score for post-operative complications can be seen and read in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. Is a care coordinator looking at that score for post-operative complications and viewing it as a metric of patient complexity? Are we going to expect a slightly longer length of stay? Might this patient need to be discharged to a skilled nursing facility rather than to home? And so thinking about literally like down to the nitty gritty in the weeds level, if I put this score in this place in the EHR, who can see it and what conclusions will they draw?
That's right. That point of use, how are they going to leverage those insights? How may it be interpreted? Really getting into like the data storytelling lane of things, right?
Right.
Like, what are all
And
the ways?
then and then letting that influence and flavor your training and your education, right? Because we have to train not only our tier 1 users who are expected use case, but we also have to think about, okay, if we can't block this off from people, then we need to tell them what it is and how to use it.
I'll never forget when I first saw you at Ohio VC Fest, how you raised your hand and said like, hi, my professional goal is to reinvent AI governance. First one for running too, but I thought that was so fascinating. And I think a perfect segue into like another thing I want to unpack with you, which is like, you talk about, especially on the governance side, helping to be like that shepherd up the mountain, right? We should be these walls for the clinicians and the operations to use AI. We should in fact guide them and we should enable them to use the AI solutions the way they were designed to be used and have like a relationship with us to help us understand how is the point of use changing, right? So as you think ahead, I like to kind of get into speculation mode a bit, but like ultimately, as you think about like reinventing AI governance or like what gets you excited about the future of it, like what are some key things that you want to try and set up in your space just to help this whole system of people work together to like make these things happen? Like, how do you think about it? Yeah.
I think in the very, very short term speculative, I have a Visio document that I have titled AI Candyland. And so it is intended to be literally a start here. And depending on what your thing is, I have a problem that I want to solve. I have a vendor that I want to work with. I want to start a company and do this or that. Based on your path, then it will guide you appropriately to many different parts of our digital domain, our legal framework. What do you need to think about? What do you really need to do? And so a really valid short-term goal is I would love to finish that diagram because right now it is several large, very black boxes. And so I want to really feel confident that not only have I mapped out everything when I have an AI idea and I want to do a thing, not only have I mapped that out in a document that can be shared, but I've talked with each and every person who owns the other parts of the processes that are touched there. And so research knows, hey, if anybody comes to Jenny and says, I have an AI idea that I want to pursue like sponsored research funding for, they're going to get kicked over, and they're going to get kicked over with this kind of expectation and this information in hand. So that's my very short-term goal. I really do feel like I have the privilege, and I'm grateful every day for the privilege of working with some really smart, very motivated people, right? That's the great thing about working in healthcare is that people tend to get into it because they want to help people and they want to do the right thing. And so I really feel like when you give those people tools that they can use, the appropriate training to use the tools, and let them know that here are the bumpers on your bowling lane. When you hit these, you're going to bounce off, and it's going to give you some feedback, and we'll talk to you about why we don't do that. And we'll talk to you about what you can do instead. And then in that case, you have a straighter shot to your strike. And that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to get to the finish line, because I truly do believe that an ecosystem that is supportive of experimentation is also an ecosystem that is supportive of trust and transparency. When you have the ability to have those sort of free conversations and say, well, why can't I have this patient data to test my chat GPT that I built on the server in my garage? Be like, okay, let's talk about it. Why can't you do that?
And also, they're so busy. Again, people, they're not thinking about AI like we are in this space. They're taking care of people, right?
Yeah.
So those guardrails, those bumpers are just like, okay, great, point and shoot. I'll be able to use it this way.
Right.
Same thing, I love that Candyland analogy. We've heard other teams talk about it as like highways with off ramps, right?
Mhm.
So if it checks these boxes, here's the off ramp to fast track and just get it approved, or say no way that it's going to happen anytime soon. Like really setting up those clear paths. And I love how you're thinking about like even kind of gamifying it in that way around, hey, you want to do this thing. There's so many paths it could take. There's so many flavors of AI solutions that are out there. Like,
Right.
let's learn and get that feedback loop around how the process is serving the people at the end of the day.
Yes. And also helping people understand that, boy, how do I want to put this? The validation step is really crucial, and it's always going to take longer than you want it to. Always. It doesn't matter if you go in like with your mind made up, this is going to take at least 6 months. Great. Now it's going to take 12. And I think one of the things that we had on our list of kind of things we wanted to talk about was scaling. Do we have enough time to talk about scaling?
Of course. Yes.
Okay.
Get into it.
So I wanted to touch really lightly on a really good, solid example of what Cleveland Clinic did when we were looking for an AI scribe vendor. Because and like start to finish, this just really, I love the way this was handled, because what came to the IT division was a strategic mandate from our chief digital officer. I want you to look at documentation. Can you figure something out for documentation? And then the rest of it was left up to us, right? To our expertise. What is mature in the documentation space? What might be helpful? What use cases do we see? So AI scribes popped out pretty quickly as a technology that was mature, that was, seeing rapid adoption. And we thought, okay, that's fine. But there are at one point, something like 126 AI scribes on the market. How do we know which of them are going to be right for us? How do we really, and the question about an AI scribe really truly is this just an Epic integration wrapped around a large language model? Because that's not actually all that interesting. And so we did a trial of 5 vendors. I thought it was going to take 6 months, and it took 12. And so we are actually still in the process of evaluating all of the data that came out of that. But what we got out of it was a really robust understanding of how these vendors compared with each other and which stood out about like in the market. 5 is too many, just for the record, in case anybody is reading this for like a blueprint for the future. Don't do 5, maybe do 3. Yeah. But what it did give us was a very, very deep understanding of pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses of the individual tools. And it helped us refine our thinking on what are the important metrics to track. To hit my other point, right? How do we know the technology is working as intended? What quality metrics do we need to track there? But also, how do we track its impact in the action space? When a clinician grabs this draft note, what then are they doing with it? How many edits are they making? Is it like consumable by the patient, or does it have to undergo additional rounds of edit to be dropped into the after visit summary? Are we able to bill and code as effectively off of that AI driven note as we are off of a human driven note? Like all of that emerges really important to discuss and think about. And then also, because these tools are scribes, and the main value proposition of a scribe, I mean, yeah, the billing and coding uplift is nice, but any scribe vendor will tell you it's for provider burnout. Okay, so does it reduce people's feelings of burnout? We have to survey them to find out. And then I also wanted to marry that up with, okay, you say you're spending a lot of time in Epic outside of scheduled hours. We have a dashboard that also tells us how much time you're spending in Epic outside of scheduled hours. So let's match those up together, because that tells us, and I'm not trying to gotcha anybody, right? But that tells us something interesting, because your perception of the time you spend on a task is important to your emotional state, to your morale. The actual time you're spending may not change as much, But if it feels like less work, or if you're grinding your teeth less about it, a very small amount of change in the number of minutes you spend in Epic may actually have a huge difference in how you feel about it. And so that tells a really interesting, nuanced story.
I think it's so interesting to see, like, yet another reason that more data mature organizations are picking up AI faster, right? Because you also have those feedback loops kind of built into the operations and the process to know the effectiveness of it. I
Yeah.
also like that, like the broader picture view, because we're going in now, like a lot of these are operational excellence, DMAIC, Six Sigma projects. What's the baseline? How do we measure that? Like start there and then see the lift. So I think that staying honest on like, okay, what impact are we intending and are we getting there? I think that's so critical for AI right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got headlines out there about something like 95% of AI projects don't deliver on ROI. I just sent another one to my husband about AI agents only actually completing like 3% of their tasks. Like it's very clear that there is intense need and curiosity to figure out what these things can do. And then we're seeing over and over again that things really fail when they're not implemented thoughtfully.
Implemented thoughtfully, and we'd also argue like requirements for them up front weren't gathered thoroughly enough, right? We didn't know exactly what we wanted to do with it. We just wanted it so bad. Yeah.
We were just joking about like the CEOs, right? What do you want? AI. When do you want it now? What do you want it to do?
Yeah.
Like
change our company, right? It's all these
right. It's the future.
Yeah. Well, this was awesome, Jenny. We got to have you back on another episode. This was such a fun conversation. For our listeners, how can they reach out or find you on LinkedIn?
Sure.
Or is there any other resources that you'd like to point them to? Just to give
absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Jennifer Lee Owens on LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm the one with this smiling with Cleveland Clinic logo in my profile. I do writing on LinkedIn, not as often as I do podcast episodes. So my podcast is Health Data Ethics. Very creative, I know. It's on YouTube. Believe there are also a few episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I will always link my podcast on my LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the best way to keep up with me. And I'm very responsive to comments and messages. So please drop me a comment. I would love to chat more.
Nice. We'll go ahead and link your LinkedIn profile plus your podcast in the description for the listeners below. Jenny, this was an awesome episode. Thank you so much for joining. And for listeners, we'll catch you on the next one. We're going to take a bit of a hiatus over the holidays, but we'll have more sometime.
Thank you all so much. This was so fun.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for watching or listening to AI or Die. Remember to listen or die on any of the podcast platforms, and make sure to subscribe or die by visiting us at getaligneai.com. We will see you on the next episode.